The Kthar were the absolute apex predators of known space. Their very appearance was designed by evolution to inspire visceral terror. Bodies covered in thick, black chitin plates that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Multiple jointed limbs tipped with claws that could shred military-grade armor. And those eyes, pale blue orbs that seemed to glow with cold, calculating malice. They moved with a speed that belied their size, capable of crossing 100 meters in mere seconds, either on all limbs or rearing up to use their front appendages as weapons. But their physical prowess was merely the beginning of what made them the galaxy's perfect nightmare. The Kthar possessed psionic capabilities that defied scientific explanation. They generated fear fields, invisible waves of pure terror that washed over any sentient creature within a kilometer radius. Victims reported experiencing their deepest, most primal fears made manifest, hallucinations so vivid they could drive the unprepared to madness. Direct psionic attacks from a Kthar could paralyze nervous systems or shatter sanity with surgical precision. They had no natural predators, no known weaknesses, no predictable patterns beyond their relentless efficiency as hunters. Their intelligence was undeniable. They used pack tactics that showcased problem-solving abilities and adaptability that rivaled those of spacefaring species. Yet all attempts at communication had failed spectacularly. The Galactic Consortium, with all its technological might and military resources, had long abandoned any hope of controlling or eradicating the Kthar. The catastrophic failure of the Hephaestus fleet, 50 warships dispatched to cleanse a Kthar infestation on Proxima 4, stood as a stark reminder of their invincibility. 48 ships destroyed, 2 returned with crews driven to madness or catatonia. The surviving recordings showed Kthar swarms adapting to weapon patterns in real time, redirecting energy attacks, and boarding vessels despite seemingly impenetrable shields. Even scientific study proved fatal. The Xenobiology Division's top minds, experts who had successfully analyzed and categorized thousands of dangerous species, vanished or returned broken from Kthar observation missions. Dr. Eliza Mercer, once the consortium's most brilliant xenopsychologist, was found gibbering in her shuttle after a failed attempt to passively observe a Kthar hunting ground. Her notes, those that made any sense, spoke of minds that reach back when observed and predators that hunt through thought itself. Official consortium policy was now painfully simple. Kthar territories were designated absolute exclusion zones. Approaching these zones meant forfeiting all rescue rights. The assumption was simple: you were already dead or soon would be. This was the reality of galactic civilization. Advanced species collectively surrendering vast regions of habitable space to creatures they could neither understand nor defeat. The Kthar were accepted as a force of nature, like black holes or supernovas, phenomena to be avoided, not conquered, which made the crew of the Nomad either the bravest or the most foolish beings in the galaxy. Most who knew them leaned heavily toward the latter. Sergeant Eva Rostova adjusted the worn leather strap of her ancient ballistic sidearm, a relic from Earth's pre-space military history that she insisted carried better luck than any plasma weapon. At 43 standard years, her face bore the weathered lines of someone who had seen too much combat and the quiet determination of someone who had walked away from it all. Her shock of prematurely white hair was cropped short, practical, like everything else about her. "Jax, how much longer until we hit Xylo's airspace?" she called toward the ship's cockpit. A grunt was the initial response, followed by the slow, deliberate voice of their engineer. 7 hours, 23 minutes. Assuming the old girl doesn't throw another tantrum. A metallic clang punctuated his statement, followed by a muttered curse in his native tongue. Jax was Cortesian, a species renowned for their engineering aptitude and equally famous for their taciturn nature. Standing nearly 2 meters tall, with gray-green skin and 4 arms, he could disassemble and reassemble virtually any technology in the known galaxy. He rarely spoke more than 10 words in sequence unless discussing mechanical problems. His loyalty to Eva, however, required no verbalization. He had followed her through situations that defied survival odds for 8 years. The Nomad itself was less a proper spacecraft and more a patchwork of improvisation and necessity. Originally a standard GC-70 transport vessel, little of its original structure remained unmodified. Jax had replaced, upgraded, and jury-rigged systems until the ship's official classification was, at best, a technicality. The consortium's vessel registry listed it as GC-70 variant. Excessive. Dr. Thorne, how's our preparation coming along? Eva called toward the ship's modest laboratory space. Dr. Eris Thorne barely registered the question. The xenolinguist/psychologist was engrossed in ancient scrolls and holographic projections displaying what appeared to be cave paintings and archaic runes. His slender fingers traced patterns in the air as his eyes, enhanced with cybernetic implants that allowed him to perceive wavelengths beyond normal human vision, darted between references. Dr. Thorne, Eva repeated louder. He startled, knocking over a stack of physical books. An antiquated medium he insisted contained information that digital formats somehow lost. Yes. Sorry, There's a fascinating correlation between these 4,000-year-old Centaurian shadow glyphs and the recorded psionic emission patterns from juvenile Cthar. I think we might be onto something with the maternal care hypothesis. Eva sighed. Thorne's theories about Cthar behavior and communication had earned him nothing but ridicule from the scientific community. His central proposition, that Cthar could be understood and potentially communicated with through recognition of their social structures, had been dismissed as desperate fantasy. His career in ruins. He had joined Eva's crew 3 years ago after she found him drunk and ranting in a spaceport bar about psionic harmonics and predatory empathy. That's great, but I need to know if your devices are ready, Eva said, tapping her foot impatiently. Thorne nodded enthusiastically. Oh yes, the psionic frequency modulators are calibrated. Jax's field generators should be able to produce the specific harmonic patterns I've identified. I truly believe that if we can replicate what I think are maternal comfort signals, we might. A loud whirring interrupted him as a heavy combat drone hovered into the common area. Roughly the size of a large canine, its matte black exterior bristled with modified defensive systems. Its central processing unit was housed in a reinforced clear dome, revealing complex circuitry that pulsed with soft blue light. Bolt's diagnostics check out, came Jax's voice over the intercom. Defensive systems at 94% capacity. Non-lethal options, all green. Bolt had begun its existence as a standard QDNL 7 military drone. Under Jax's care, it had evolved into something far more sophisticated. Its primary function remained protection, but its programming had expanded to include complex tactical support capabilities. It could operate independently for up to 72 hours and had saved their lives more times than Eva cared to remember. Eva nodded, taking a moment to run her hand along Bolt's smooth outer shell. The drone emitted a soft mechanical purr, another of Jax's unorthodox modifications. Good boy, she murmured. The common area's view screen flashed, indicating an incoming transmission. Eva straightened her worn military jacket, more habit than necessity, and accepted the call. The desperate face of Administrator Kell filled the screen. Behind him, emergency lights flashed, and distant screams could be heard. Sergeant Rostova, please tell me you're close. We've lost the eastern quadrant completely. Our shelters won't hold much longer. Eva maintained her calm demeanor, though her stomach tightened. We're on approach, Administrator. 7 hours out. Can you hold that long? Kell's eyes darted off-screen, following some unseen movement. We'll have to. The last transport couldn't land. The Cthar swarmed the landing zone. We've pulled everyone into the central mining complex. The reinforced walls are buying us time, but he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew Cthar could eventually breach almost any physical barrier. Hold your position. Minimize all external communications and electronic emissions. We'll signal when we're in orbit, Eva instructed. The payment has been transferred to the escrow account, Kell added hastily. 3 million credits. Everything we have. Just, please find a way to save us. The screen went dark before Eva could respond. She turned to find Dr. Thorne and Jax watching her. Even Bolt had pivoted its sensory array in her direction. 3 million credits, Jax said quietly. Enough to actually retire. Buy a proper ship. Maybe that terraforming license you talked about. Or fund proper Cthar research for years, Thorne added, eyes gleaming with possibilities. Eva rubbed the old scar that ran from her left temple to jaw, a souvenir from her military days. If we survive to spend it, let's go over the plan again. And Thorne, this time, stick to what we've agreed. No improvising. Dr. Thorne nodded, though the gleam in his eyes suggested his mind was already racing with alternative approaches. The journey to Xylos continued in a blur of preparation and tension. Eva spent hours reviewing tactical approaches, studying the colony's layout, and preparing for various contingencies. Jax fine-tuned their equipment, particularly the non-lethal defensive systems they would rely on. Bolt ran continuous simulations, improving its response algorithms. Dr. Thorne remained immersed in his research, occasionally emerging to share a new insight or adjustment to their approach. His theories centered around a revolutionary idea that Cthar, despite their fearsome reputation, possessed complex social structures with specific communication patterns. Most controversial was his belief that their psionic abilities weren't merely weapons, but sophisticated communication tools that had been misinterpreted by terrified observers. All predatory species have maternal instincts, he explained during their final briefing, projecting images of ancient predators from various worlds. Lions, terrestrial apex predators, would tear apart any creature that threatened their territory, except their own cubs. Earth's orcas, perfectly capable of killing anything in the ocean, developed complex family structures and teaching behaviors. Eva remained skeptical but practical. I don't need them to adopt us, Doctor. I just need them to leave the colony alone long enough for evacuation. That's just it, Thorne insisted, eyes wide with conviction. What if we could establish ourselves as non-prey? Not through force, that's been tried and failed catastrophically, but through behavioral signals that register as not food or even part of territory. Every territorial predator makes these distinctions. Jax grunted from where he was adjusting a handheld device. Theory's interesting. Applications suicidal. Which is why we'll start small, Eva interjected. One juvenile Cthar, separated from the main pack. We test the approach in controlled conditions. Controlled. Jax raised a skeptical eyebrow. With Cthar, as controlled as possible, Eva amended. Bolt will provide perimeter security. Your modified sonic lures should help with isolation. Dr. Thorne's frequency modulators might disrupt their psionic attacks enough for us to attempt contact. And if it fails? Jax asked the question they all were thinking. Eva patted her sidearm. Then we abandon the approach, extract as many colonists as possible, and recommend orbital bombardment as the only solution. But we try this first. The consortium's standard approach has failed for decades. Maybe it's time for something completely insane. Their arrival at Xylos was marked by an eerie silence. No standard control communications greeted them, no landing instructions. The sprawling mining colony, once home to nearly 7,000 people, appeared abandoned from orbit. Thermal scans told a different story. Concentrated heat signatures in the central mining complex indicated survivors huddled together, scattered throughout the outlying areas, particularly dense in the eastern quadrant, were the distinctive thermal patterns of Cthar. They're hunting, Dr. Thorne observed, studying the movement patterns. See how they spread out but maintain sensory contact? Classic pack behavior. Eva nodded grimly. Jax, find us a landing zone. Close enough to observe but outside their immediate territory. The descent was tense, with Jax manually piloting to minimize engine noise. The nomads settled onto a plateau overlooking a valley where sensor readings indicated Cthar activity. The landscape was eerily beautiful. Violet-hued vegetation swayed in the light breeze under twin moons that cast contradicting shadows across the terrain. Deploying reconnaissance drones, Jax announced, fingers dancing across the control panel. 6 small, virtually silent drones detached from the Nomad and dispersed in different directions. The crew gathered around the main view screen as the first images came through. The devastation was sobering. Outlying structures had been torn apart with surgical precision. Not random destruction, but methodical dismantling to expose the occupants who had sought shelter inside. "They're learning," Dr. Thorne whispered, "adapting to human defensive structures." Eva's response was cut short as one drone transmitted clear footage of a Kthar pack in motion. Even through a screen, their presence was chilling. 7 adult specimens moved through the ruins of what had been a hydroponics facility. Their movements were unnervingly coordinated, with clear communication that required no visible signals. When one discovered a potential hiding spot, others would converge to cut off escape routes before the investigation began. "There," Dr. Thorne pointed excitedly. "That smaller one. Definitely juvenile, possibly subadult." The Kthar he indicated was about 2/3 the size of the others. Its movements were slightly less fluid, its reactions a fraction slower. It followed the adults, but occasionally diverted to investigate objects the others ignored. "That's our target," Eva decided. "Jax, how quickly can you set up the sonic?" "Lures. 2 hours. Need to calibrate to local atmospheric conditions." Eva nodded. "Dr. Thorne, final check on your equipment. I want everything ready by nightfall. We move when the smaller moon sets. The darkness should give us additional cover." As night descended on Xylos, the true danger of their mission became palpable. Even at their considerable distance from the Kthar territory, a subtle psychological pressure began to build. Jax was the first to notice it, his naturally stoic demeanor giving way to uncharacteristic restlessness. "Something's wrong," he muttered, checking and rechecking his equipment. "Can feel something." "Watching." Dr. Thorne nodded eagerly. "Their psionic field extends further than previously documented." "Fascinating. We're experiencing the outer edges of their territorial awareness." "Can your devices counter it?" Eva asked, fighting her own growing sense of unease. "To a degree," Thorne replied, adjusting settings on a collar-like device around his neck. "These should filter the worst effects, but direct exposure will be much more intense." The plan was deceptively simple. Use Jax's sonic lures to create disturbances at the far edge of the Kthar territory, drawing most of the pack away. Meanwhile, a more subtle set of harmonics, based on Dr. Thorne's controversial research, would attempt to attract the juvenile to an isolated position where they could attempt contact. As they prepared to move out, Eva addressed her small team. "Remember, no lethal force unless absolutely necessary. Our objective is contact, not combat. If my hand goes up, we retreat immediately. No heroics, no last stands." Bolt hovered nearby, its weapon systems reconfigured for defensive operations only. The drone would serve as their mobile shield and early warning system. They moved under the cover of darkness, each step carefully placed. The modified equipment they carried was awkward: Jax's sonic devices, Thorne psionic modulators, and various sensor packages designed to gather data even if the mission failed. Nobody spoke, communicating only through hand signals and their secure short-range comms. The first phase went surprisingly smoothly. Jax's sonic lures activated sequentially, creating a pattern of disturbances that mimicked panicked prey. Through drone surveillance, they confirmed that 5 of the 7 adult Kthar moved to investigate, leaving the juvenile and 1 adult in the area they had designated for contact. Phase 2. Eva whispered into her comm. Jax activated the second set of harmonics, subtler vibrations based on Dr. Thorne's analysis of what might constitute non-threatening signals to a Kthar. The effect was not immediate. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then, the drone tracking the juvenile Kthar registered movement. It was separating from the adult, moving with apparent curiosity toward the source of the harmonics. "It's working," Dr. Thorne breathed, his voice tight with excitement. "It's actually responding to the maternal harmon." "Quiet," Eva cut him off. "Movement at our 3 o'clock." They froze, barely breathing. Through the dense violet undergrowth, something was approaching. Not from the direction they had anticipated, but circling around. The juvenile Cthar had somehow detected their position and was approaching from an unexpected angle. "It's hunting us," Jax muttered. "No," Dr. Thorne countered. "It's investigating. If it were hunting, it would have." The attack came with no warning. One moment the undergrowth was still, the next, a blur of chitin and limbs erupted toward them. Even as a juvenile, the Cthar moved with terrifying speed. Bolt immediately interposed itself, deploying a light-based defensive screen that momentarily disoriented the creature. The physical threat, however, was secondary to what followed. A wave of pure, primordial terror washed over the team. Eva's vision swam, with images of darkness closing in, of being buried alive while something scratched just beyond the darkness. Jax dropped to one knee, his forearms wrapped around himself as he muttered in his native language. Dr. Thorne alone seemed partially shielded, his psionic dampening collar glowing brightly as it struggled to filter the attack. Defensive P positions, Eva managed through gritted teeth, fighting through the artificially induced panic. "No." Lethal response. Jax. Secondary harmonics. Through sheer force of will, Jax activated his secondary device. A complex series of vibrations filled the air, not sounds in the conventional sense, but patterns designed to mimic Cthar territorial markers based on Dr. Thorne's research. The effect was immediate. The juvenile Cthar paused in its advance, its glowing eyes fixed on the humans with predatory intensity. But now there was something else in its posture, hesitation, perhaps even confusion. Eva's training took over, despite the crushing weight of fear pressing against her mind. She slowly reached for the specialized container attached to her belt. Inside was the culmination of Dr. Thorne's research, a compound that emitted pheromones and chemical signals theorized to trigger recognition patterns in Cthar sensory systems. Her movements were deliberate, non-threatening. The juvenile Cthar tracked her with unblinking eyes, its limbs tense and ready to strike. The psionic pressure increased, squeezing her consciousness like a vice, but Eva continued. She placed the container on the ground and took 3 slow steps backward. "Now, Doctor," she whispered. Dr. Thorne activated the final component, a device that emitted a complex electromagnetic pattern meant to resonate with Cthar psionic signatures. According to his theory, it approximated the all-clear signal that dominant Cthar might use to indicate safe territory. For several excruciating seconds, nothing happened. The juvenile Cthar remained motionless, its posture unreadable to human eyes. The psionic assault continued unabated, threatening to overwhelm their defenses. Then, almost imperceptibly, the pressure began to ease. The juvenile shifted its weight, multiple limbs adjusting position. Its eyes, still fixed on the humans, changed subtly in color, from cold blue to a deeper, less intense shade. "It's working," Dr. Thorne whispered, barely audible. "Don't move. Don't speak." The juvenile Cthar extended a sensory appendage toward the container Eva had placed down. The limb hovered above it for a moment before making contact. The creature's entire body seemed to shudder slightly, and the psionic field fluctuated in intensity. "It's processing," Dr. Thorne explained, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. "The chemical signals are unfamiliar but register as non-threatening. It's trying to categorize us." Eva maintained her position, fighting the instinct to reach for her weapon. The juvenile Cthar circled the container, always keeping the humans in its field of vision. Its movements became less aggressive, more investigative. Then came the most shocking development. The Cthar lowered itself, almost sitting near the container. The psionic field it projected shifted dramatically, from waves of terror to something more neutral, still alien and uncomfortable to human minds, but no longer actively hostile. "Holy shit," Jax muttered. "It's actually accepting our presence," Dr. Thorne finished, his voice trembling with vindication. "Not as prey, not as threat, as something to be investigated." Eva allowed herself a cautious breath. "How long will this last?" "Unknown," Dr. Thorne admitted. This is unprecedented. We should. Bolt's warning system activated suddenly, its sensors detecting rapid movement from multiple directions. The adult Cthar that had remained behind was approaching fast, and behind it, the others were returning from investigating the sonic lures. They know, Eva realized. They know their juvenile is with us. Defensive positions. Jax, ready the ship for immediate evac. Jax hesitated, clearly torn between retreat and continuing this miraculous breakthrough. But we've just... That was an order, Eva snapped. Dr. Thorne, keep your modulators running. If we lose what we've established, this was all for nothing. The juvenile Cthar sensed the change immediately. Its posture shifted, limbs tensing, but, remarkably, it did not resume its attack. Instead, it moved to position itself between the humans and the approaching adults, its behavior unclassifiable by any known Cthar studies. The first adult Cthar burst from the vegetation with terrifying speed. Twice the size of the juvenile, its presence brought a crushing wave of psionic pressure that nearly dropped Eva to her knees. Dr. Thorne's equipment sparked and whined under the strain, barely functioning against this more powerful assault. What followed defied all expectation. The juvenile emitted a series of clicks and subsonic vibrations while maintaining its position between the humans and the adult. The adult Cthar stopped its advance, multiple limbs raised in what might have been aggression or merely surprise. "They're communicating," Dr. Thorne gasped, his dampening collar glowing white-hot as it struggled against the adult's psionic field. "The juvenile is... I think it's defending us, or at least asserting some kind of claim." The adult Cthar moved closer to the juvenile, sensory appendages extended. The psionic pressure shifted, becoming more focused, more directed, less a blanket of terror and more a precise probe. Eva felt it targeting her mind specifically, sifting through surface thoughts and emotions with alien precision. "It's scanning us," Dr. Thorne explained through gritted teeth, trying to understand what we've done with the juvenile. Eva forced herself to remain still, to project nothing but calm determination despite the excruciating mental invasion. "Will, it understand we mean no harm." "Unknown," Thorne admitted, "but it hasn't killed us immediately, which is already beyond all precedent." The remaining Cthar arrived, surrounding their position in a loose semicircle of chitin and deadly limbs. The psionic pressure multiplied, becoming almost unbearable. Bolt positioned itself protectively above the team, though its defensive capabilities would be meaningless against a full-pack attack. The juvenile maintained its position, continuing its incomprehensible communication with the adults. The container Eva had placed down had become the focal point of interest, with several adults extending sensory appendages toward it without actually touching it. "They're curious," Dr. Thorne whispered. "The chemical markers we synthesized, they recognize elements but can't categorize the whole. It's confusing them." Minutes stretched painfully as the Cthar pack communicated through means imperceptible to human senses. The dominant adult, distinguishable by subtle coloration differences and the deference shown by others, continued its psionic probe of the humans, focusing particularly on Dr. Thorne and his equipment. Eva noticed something extraordinary happening to the lead Cthar's eyes. The cold blue glow had shifted through several shades, finally settling on a deep purple hue unlike anything documented in Cthar studies. Its posture changed subtly, some of the aggressive tension bleeding away. A decision was being made, though by what criteria or reasoning, no human could comprehend. The dominant Cthar suddenly reared up to its full height, nearly 3 meters of armored, lethal predator. Eva's hand instinctively moved toward her weapon, but Dr. Thorne's urgent gesture stopped her. The creature released a subsonic pulse that Eva felt rather than heard, reverberating through her bones and organs. The effect on the other Cthar was immediate. As one, they backed away, creating a clear path toward the direction of the nomad. Only the juvenile remained, still positioned near the humans, its own eyes now matching the purple hue of the dominant adult. "It's letting us go," Dr. Thorne breathed, disbelief evident in his voice. And the juvenile, I think it's being allowed to stay with us, Eva finished, equally stunned. Is that possible? Dr. Thorne shook his head slightly. Nothing about Cthar behavior suggested they would ever voluntarily relinquish one of their own. This contradicts everything we thought we knew. The dominant Cthar maintained its position for another moment, its alien gaze fixed on Eva with inscrutable purpose. Then, with a final pulse of psionic energy that felt almost like a warning, or perhaps a promise, it turned and disappeared into the vegetation. The others followed, moving with their characteristic speed and precision, until only the juvenile remained. "We need to move," Jax urged, already backing toward the ship, "before they change whatever passes for their minds." Eva nodded, her tactical training reasserting itself through the haze of amazement. "Slow movements. Doctor, keep your equipment running. Jax, prepare a containment area on the ship." "Containment?" Dr. Thorne questioned. "I don't think restraints will." "Not restraints," Eva clarified. "An environment. Something that won't feel threatening. We're bringing it with us." The journey back to the Nomad was surreal. The juvenile Cthar followed at a consistent distance, neither threatening nor entirely comfortable with their presence. Occasionally, it would stop to investigate something in the environment, but always return to trailing them with apparent purpose. Once aboard, Jax quickly modified the ship's cargo bay, adjusting temperature and humidity to match the external environment and installing Dr. Thorne's harmonic generators throughout the space. The juvenile Cthar hesitated at the ship's ramp, its sensory appendages sampling the unfamiliar environment cautiously. Dr. Thorne placed another of his chemical markers just inside the cargo bay. After several tense moments, the juvenile entered, moving with the caution of a predator in unfamiliar territory. With the Cthar secured in the adapted cargo bay, Eva contacted Administrator Kell at the mining colony. His disbelief at their report quickly gave way to desperate hope. "You're saying the Cthar pack might actually withdraw?" he asked, his haggard face showing the first signs of hope. "We believe so," Eva confirmed. The dominant individual seemed to have made some kind of decision regarding territorial boundaries. Dr. Thorne thinks the removal of the juvenile might satisfy whatever instinct was driving their aggression toward the colony. Or, Dr. Thorne interjected, they've categorized the colony as something other than a food source through our interaction. Either way, you should prepare for evacuation as soon as the opportunity presents itself. Administrator, Kell nodded gravely. The next supply transport arrives in 3 days. If the Cthar truly withdraw, we'll have everyone ready. The payment has already cleared to your account, Sergeant. Whatever you did, thank you. As they prepared for departure, Eva found Dr. Thorne observing the juvenile Cthar through the cargo bay's monitoring system. The creature was methodically exploring its new environment, testing boundaries and examining the various objects Jax had installed to enrich the space. "It's remarkable," Thorne said without looking away from the screen. "No signs of aggression, no apparent distress at separation from its pack. It's as if what?" Eva prompted. "As if it was permitted, perhaps even instructed, to come with us," he finished, turning to face her. "Eva, do you understand what this means? Every assumption about Cthar behavior has been wrong. They're not mindless predators. They're capable of complex decisions, social structures beyond simple pack dynamics, and possibly even cultural exchange." Eva watched the juvenile manipulate an object Jax had created, a puzzle-like structure containing some of their chemical markers. "You think we can actually communicate with them?" "I think we've already started," Thorne replied, his eyes bright with possibilities. "This juvenile is the first bridge between our species. With time and study, we might establish a true common ground." Jax joined them, his normally impassive face showing rare concern. "News is already spreading. Consortium's going to want the Cthar. Military will claim jurisdiction." Eva nodded grimly. "Then we need to stay ahead of them. File the mission report, but classify the details of our approach as proprietary technology. That'll buy us time." "Time for what?" Jax asked. "Time to understand what we've done," Eva replied, watching the juvenile Cthar examine its reflection in a polished surface. Time to see if Dr. Thorne's theories hold up. Time to determine if this is a fluke or the beginning of something revolutionary. As the Nomad broke Xylos's atmosphere, setting course for the outer systems where they could work without immediate consortium oversight, Eva found herself contemplating the sheer improbability of their success. Decades of military might had failed to subdue the Cthar. Scientific minds had failed to understand them. Yet their small crew, armed with nothing but outlandish theories and the courage to test them, had achieved first contact. Perhaps, Eva reflected, watching the stars stretch into hyperspace streaks, that was humanity's unique contribution to the galactic community. Not superior technology or physical prowess, but the distinctive blend of curiosity, empathy, and calculated madness that drove them to attempt what more rational species deemed impossible. In a cargo bay, the juvenile Cthar's eyes shifted through shades of purple as it adapted to its new environment. The first of its kind to enter a partnership, however tentative, with the only species insane enough to try. 3 weeks later, on a remote outpost station where regulations were flexibly interpreted, Eva stood before a reinforced observation window. On the other side, Dr. Thorne sat cross-legged on the floor, a series of objects arranged between him and the juvenile Cthar, which had grown noticeably since their departure from Xylos. "Any progress?" she asked Jax, who was monitoring a complex array of sensors. "Some," he replied, displaying a screen of waveform patterns. Juvenile psionic emissions changing. More structured, less aggressive harmonics. Thorne thinks it's attempting to modulate for human comprehension. Eva watched as the Cthar extended a limb toward an object, then retracted it when Dr. Thorne made a simple hand gesture. Basic communication, but communication nonetheless. And the news from the consortium? Jax's expression darkened. Mixed. Scientific community in uproar, half calling for immediate termination of the specimen, half demanding access for study. Military wants weaponization research. Political division about whether we've committed ecological crime or achieved diplomatic breakthrough. In Xylos, colony evacuation completed yesterday. Cthar pack remains present but hasn't interfered. Territorial boundaries holding. Eva nodded, watching the juvenile Cthar mimic one of Dr. Thorne's gestures with surprising precision. And the offers for our research? 17 so far. Highest bid, 12 million credits from Xenological Institute on Europa. Decline them all. Eva decided. This isn't about money anymore. Jax raised an eyebrow, but didn't question her decision. After a moment, he asked, "What is it about, then?" Eva continued watching the extraordinary scene of human and Cthar engaged in rudimentary communication. Predator and prey transcending natural roles through nothing but will and curiosity. Understanding, she finally answered. For countless generations, species have been relegated to either resources or threats. What if there's another way? What if communication is possible with any intelligence, given enough creativity and courage? Dangerous philosophy, Jax noted. Most predators remain predators. True, Eva acknowledged. But predators can also become partners. Earth history is full of examples. Wolves becoming dogs, big cats forming bonds with handlers. The line between predator and ally isn't fixed, it's negotiated. In the observation room, the juvenile Cthar had created a pattern with the objects, a geometric arrangement that prompted visible excitement from Dr. Thorne. He carefully rearranged several items, creating a responsive pattern. The Cthar observed, its eyes shifting to a deeper purple before it extended a limb and adjusted the pattern further. It's creating a syntax. Dr. Thorne's voice came through the speaker. Spatial relationships as grammatical structure. Absolutely brilliant. Eva smiled slightly. And to think the consortium wanted to just keep bombing them from orbit. Most would still prefer that approach. Jax noted, his 4 arms working simultaneously to adjust sensor calibrations. Safer, more predictable, but ultimately futile, Eva replied. How many decades of conflict have proven that? Sometimes the insane approach is the only one left. The juvenile Cthar suddenly froze, its sensory appendages extending fully. Dr. Thorne tensed, recognizing the posture change. The creature's eyes shifted rapidly between color states before settling on a bright, alert blue they hadn't seen since the initial encounter. "Something's wrong," Eva said, instantly reaching for her sidearm. Jax checked his instruments. Psionic spike. Massive energy signature. Dr. Thorne slowly backed away from the Kthar, his hands raised in the non-threatening gesture they had established. "It's receiving something," he said quietly into his communicator. "A signal of some kind." The ship's alert system activated, bathing the corridors in red emergency lighting. Eva rushed to the nearest terminal. Proximity alert. Something's approaching. The juvenile Kthar began emitting a series of clicking sounds while its limbs tapped a complex rhythm against the floor. Its psionic field, previously modulated to comfortable levels for human interaction, surged in intensity. "Eva," Jax called urgently. Long-range sensors detecting vessel. Unknown configuration. Massive energy signature. Dr. Thorne exited the observation room, his face pale but excited. "It's them. The juvenile is responding to contact from its kind." Eva accessed the ship's defensive systems. "How?" "We're 17 light-years from Xylos." "Unknown," Jax admitted, "but energy pattern matches Kthar psionic signatures. Amplified exponentially." The view screen activated, showing a vessel approaching their position. If it could truly be called a vessel. The structure defied conventional design, appearing more like an obsidian crystalline formation than a constructed ship. No visible propulsion systems, no recognizable components, just a perfect, geometric shape that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "They have ships," Eva whispered, the implications staggering. "Interstellar capability. Not ships as we understand them," Dr. Thorne corrected, studying the readings with wide eyes. "More like living extensions. The material composition is organic crystalline, similar to Kthar exoskeletons, but evolved for space travel." "Weapons?" Eva asked Jax tensely. "Unknown. No recognizable weapons systems. But energy readings indicate capabilities far beyond our defensive capacity." The juvenile Kthar-S behavior changed dramatically. It moved to the center of the observation room, assuming a formal posture they had never witnessed before, multiple limbs arranged in precise positions, sensory appendages fully extended. "It's preparing," Dr. Thorne realized. "This isn't random. It's a ritual stance." "Preparing for what?" Eva demanded. Before Dr. Thorne could theorize, the unknown vessel accelerated to a position directly above their outpost. No communication attempts, no standard approach procedures. It simply arrived with a presence that demanded acknowledgement. "Should I initiate contact protocols?" Jax asked, finger hovering over the communication system. Eva hesitated, years of military training screaming caution, while scientific curiosity pushed for engagement. "No, let's see what they want first." The answer came without warning. A beam of obsidian energy, if energy could be described as black, lanced from the vessel to their outpost. Alarms blared as systems registered the intrusion, but strangely, no damage occurred. The beam terminated precisely at the observation room, where the juvenile Kthar waited. "It's a transport mechanism," Dr. Thorne breathed as the juvenile Kthar-S form began to shimmer within the beam. "They're retrieving it." Eva made an instinctive move toward the observation room, but Jax caught her arm with one of his. "Wait, look." The juvenile Kthar wasn't simply being extracted. It was communicating. Its limbs moved in that same formal pattern, but now accompanied by pulses in its psionic field that their instruments could detect but not interpret. The black beam fluctuated in response. Dr. Thorne frantically recorded everything, his fingers flying across multiple interfaces. "It's explaining, reporting. This is deliberate communication with its elders." The beam suddenly widened, enveloping not just the juvenile, but extending toward the corridor where they stood. Eva tensed, hand on her weapon, but Dr. Thorne held up a restraining hand. "Wait," he urged. "I don't think this is an attack." The expanded beam stabilized, and within it, a form began to materialize beside the juvenile Cthar. Larger, more heavily armored, with eyes that glowed with intense purple light, an adult Cthar had transported onto their station. Eva inhaled sharply. Security protocols now? Belay that, Dr. Thorne countermanded, his eyes never leaving the new arrival. Look at its stance. Look at its eyes. This isn't aggression. Indeed, the adult Cthar maintained a formal posture similar to the juvenile's. Its psionic field, while immensely powerful, wasn't projecting the terror waves typical of Cthar encounters. Instead, it maintained a carefully modulated presence, uncomfortable to human perception but not debilitating. It wants to communicate, Dr. Thorne whispered in awe. Eva exchanged glances with Jax, who looked equally stunned. After a moment's consideration, she made her decision. Open the secure channel to Consortium headquarters. They need to see this. You sure? Jax questioned. Once the Consortium gets involved, they'll try to weaponize it, control it, study it to death. Eva nodded grimly. But they need to know. This changes everything we thought about Cthar, about first contact protocols, about interspecies communication itself. As Jax established the connection, Eva stepped closer to the observation window. The adult Cthar turned its attention directly to her, its glowing purple eyes fixing on her with unmistakable intelligence. There was no mindless predator in that gaze, only an alien consciousness regarding her with what might have been curiosity, assessment, or something humans had no concept for. The juvenile moved to position itself between the adult and the humans, not defensively, but introductorily. Its gestures seemed to indicate the humans, then itself, then back to the adult in what Dr. Thorne would later describe as presenting known entities to unknown entities, basic social introduction protocols. My God, Dr. Thorne whispered. It's not just reporting. It's facilitating a meeting. The adult Cthar extended a sensory appendage toward the window, separating them. Not aggressively, but with precise, controlled movement. Eva, acting on instinct rather than protocol, stepped forward and placed her palm against the transparent barrier. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with delicate precision, the Cthar matched its appendage to her hand position on the opposite side of the barrier. A gesture of connection, of acknowledgement, of potential understanding. Behind them, the Consortium communication channel activated, displaying the stunned face of High Commander Voss. Sergeant Rostova, what am I seeing? Is that a Cthar? Two Cthar? In controlled conditions. Eva didn't turn away from the window, from a connection being formed across species barriers that had seemed insurmountable for generations. Yes, Commander. And they're here by choice. Impossible, Voss breathed. All attempts at capture have. Not capture, Eva corrected. Contact. Communication. They came to us. They're trying to understand us, as much as we're trying to understand them. The adult Cthar withdrew its appendage and turned to the juvenile. A complex exchange of psionic patterns followed, measured by Jax's instruments but incomprehensible to human analysis. The juvenile responded with its own patterns, occasionally gesturing toward the humans with movements that seemed almost proud. Dr. Thorne couldn't contain his excitement. It's explaining what it's learned, showing its progress, like a student reporting to a teacher. The adult Cthar suddenly shifted position, its form seeming to grow more formal, more deliberate. It produced an object from within its exoskeleton, a small crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. With ceremonial precision, it placed the object on the floor directly before the window. A gift? Eva questioned. Dr. Thorne shook his head, eyes wide. More likely a tool, a means of communication. This is... He struggled for words. This is beyond significant. This is historic. On the communication channel, Commander Voss barked orders to unseen subordinates. I want a Science Division vessel dispatched immediately. Full containment protocols. Security detail. With respect, Commander, Eva interrupted. That approach will fail. The Cthar aren't prisoners or specimens. They're visitors, ambassadors, even. That's not your determination to make, Sergeant, Voss replied coldly. These creatures have devastated colonies across 3 sectors. Because we approach them as enemies, Dr. Thorne interjected. Because we never attempted to understand their communication methods, their social structures, their perception of territory and threat. The adult Cthar seemed to sense the conflict. Its posture shifted subtly, eyes shifting from purple to a cooler blue. The psionic field it projected intensified slightly, causing monitoring equipment to register caution warnings. Eva made a swift decision. Commander, I recommend you witness but not intervene. What's happening here is unprecedented. If we revert to standard protocols, we lose everything we've gained. And what exactly have you gained, Sergeant? Voss demanded. Eva looked at the Cthar, predators that had terrified the galaxy for generations, as they waited patiently, communicating in their alien way, having come not to hunt, but to connect. A beginning, she answered simply. The first step toward understanding the most feared species in known space. The possibility that they're not just predators, but a civilization we've been unable to recognize as such. The crystalline object the adult Cthar had placed down suddenly activated, projecting a complex, three-dimensional pattern into the air between them. Mathematical sequences, geometric progressions, orbital mechanics. Universal principles represented in a format that transcended language barriers. Dr. Thorne gasped. It's a primer. A communication baseline. They're establishing common, conceptual ground. Commander Voss fell silent, watching as the projection shifted through increasingly complex representations, stellar cartography, elemental compositions, energy state transitions. Universal constants that any spacefaring species would recognize, presented in a sequence that demonstrated not just intelligence, but teaching intent. How long until your science division arrives? Eva asked quietly. 16 hours, minimum, Voss replied, his tone notably less certain. Eva nodded. Then we have 16 hours to establish as much common ground as possible. Dr. Thorne, your lead on this. Jax, maintain full sensor recording of everything. I want interpretable data that can't be dismissed or classified away. And after those 16 hours? Dr. Thorne asked, already gathering his equipment to begin working with the Cthar communication system. Eva watched the two Cthar, juvenile and adult, as they adjusted the crystalline projector to display what appeared to be social groupings. Cthar family structures, territorial boundaries, resource allocation patterns. A willingness to be known, to be understood. After that, she said with quiet determination, we make the case that first contact has officially been established with a previously misunderstood species. We argue against containment, against weaponization, against all the old approaches that failed. We push for diplomatic protocols instead of military ones. Jax grunted skeptically. Consortium military won't easily surrender control of something they've feared for generations. No, Eve agreed. But they'll have to acknowledge that their approach has failed. And that sometimes the insane approach, treating intelligent predators as potential partners rather than threats, might be the only one that works. As Dr. Thorne began tentative interaction with the Cthar communication system, Eva reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them here. From a desperate mission to save a mining colony to potentially rewriting galactic diplomatic history, all because they had been willing to question assumptions, to try what others deemed madness. The Cthar adult's eyes met hers across the barrier, intelligent and alien, yet somehow recognizable in their focused intensity. Eva nodded slightly in acknowledgement, and the creature's appendages shifted in what might have been a gesture of reciprocation. Understanding would not come easily. Trust would be harder still. But the impossible first step had been taken. Not by the might of military fleets or the calculated strategies of diplomatic corps, but by a small crew willing to approach the galaxy's most feared predators with curiosity instead of weapons, with respect instead of fear. Humans, it seemed, were indeed the only species insane enough to tame them. Or perhaps, Eva thought as she watched the exchanges grow increasingly complex, the only species insane enough to recognize that taming was the wrong approach entirely. Perhaps what the Cthar had needed all along was simply someone mad enough to see past the terror to the intelligence beyond, someone willing to take the first perilous step toward communication when all rational calculation screamed to retreat. As the crystalline projector shifted to display what appeared to be historical records of Cathar civilization, spaceborne crystalline structures orbiting distant stars, complex societal hierarchies, artistic or perhaps religious significance attached to certain mathematical patterns, Eva felt a profound sense of possibility unfold before them. A future where humans and Cathar might share the stars not as predator and prey, but as different kinds of minds finding common ground across the vast gulf of evolutionary divergence. Commander Voss continued to watch in stunned silence from the communication channel, witnessing the undeniable reality that generations of scientific consensus and military doctrine regarding the Cathar had been based on fundamental misunderstandings, or perhaps on the simple failure to approach them correctly. Sometimes, Eva murmured, more to herself and to the others, you have to be a little mad to see what the sane have missed completely. The adult Cathar tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words despite the impossibility of linguistic comprehension. Its eyes shifted once more to that deep, thoughtful purple, a color they were beginning to associate with contemplation or perhaps approval. Understanding might take generations. Trust might take longer still. But the impossible first step had been taken, and there would be no going back to the old ways of fear and avoidance. For better or worse, humans and Cathar had begun the long journey toward recognition across the ultimate border, the border between fundamentally different minds. And perhaps that journey, however perilous, was the truest calling of both species in a universe full of differences waiting to be bridged.